Nighttime in Los Angeles has its own rhythm. During the day, the streets are full of cars honking, people talking, and footsteps rushing everywhere. But at night, everything changes. The city becomes quiet. The only sounds left are the far-off sirens, the hum of streetlights, and sometimes, the lonely echo of someone walking down the sidewalk. Keanu Reeves never cared much about being famous. Some actors loved bright lights and big parties, but not him. He liked simple things. He liked quiet moments. He liked little routines that made him feel normal. One of those routines was his late-night trips to a small 24-hour market. He never bought much, just a few simple things. Maybe some fruit, a bottle of water, or a small snack. Nothing fancy. He liked how he could walk in, pick up what he needed, and leave without anyone paying too much attention to him. He liked blending in, feeling like just another person in the city. But tonight felt different. Keanu had been to this market many times before. He had seen the same workers night after night. One of them was an older woman with gray hair, slightly crooked glasses, and a face that always looked tired. She always wore the same uniform, spent her time putting food on shelves, cleaning the floors, and working without talking much. He had seen her so many times that she had become part of the background, just someone who was always there. But tonight, for some reason, he noticed her. She wasn't just tired. She looked weighed down. Not just by the long hours of work, but by something heavier, something invisible. She was holding a small plastic bag in her hands. It wasn't big, but she clutched it tightly like it was very important. She walked slower than usual. Her shoulders slumped. Then, without a word to anyone, she walked out of the store through the side door and disappeared into the night. Keanu watched her go. Something about it didn't feel right. He paid for his things and left like he always did. He walked back to his home, tried to go to sleep, and tried to ignore the feeling in his chest. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Where did she go after work? Did she have a family waiting for her? Did she have a home to go to? He had seen her so many times but never once wondered about her life outside the store. And now that thought wouldn't leave him alone. The next night, Keanu went back to the market at the same time. And there she was again, working just like always. But this time, Keanu watched her closely. He noticed the little things he had missed before. The way she sighed when she thought no one was looking. The way her shoulders slumped more as the hours passed. She looked so small. I'm so tired. Then midnight struck. She picked up her small plastic bag, gave a quick goodbye to the cashier, and walked out the side door. Keanu was about to head home, just like every night before. But something made him stop. He watched her leave. She was wearing a green blouse, clean but old. The fabric hung loosely on her thin body, like she had lost weight. And this time, Keanu noticed something strange. She didn't wait for a bus. She didn't wave down a taxi. She didn't look around for a car. She just started walking. Keanu stood there watching her go. There was something about the way she walked. Slow but not like someone enjoying the night air. It was different. Like she was carrying something heavy inside her. She held her plastic bag close to her chest like it was the most important thing in the world. He waited for her to turn a corner and stop at a bus stop. But she didn't. She kept walking. And then, before he could even think about it, Keanu made a decision. He started following her. Keanu stayed far behind so she wouldn't see him. He wasn't sure why he was doing this, he just knew that he had to. She walked with purpose, like she knew exactly where she was going. At first, the city was still alive. A few bars were open, some stores had their lights on, and the sound of cars filled the air. But as she kept walking, the streets changed. The bright lights faded. The sidewalks became emptier. The sounds of traffic grew quieter. The tall, modern buildings turned into older, worn-down ones. Their paint was peeling, their signs were broken. The streetlights were dimmer, casting long, uneven shadows. Keanu's chest tightened. She wasn't heading home. She was going somewhere else. And with every step, he felt more sure that something was very, very wrong. Keanu kept following her. The farther they went, the quieter it became. The city was falling asleep. There were only a few people on the streets now, and they walked like ghosts, silent, lost in their own thoughts. The woman held her plastic bag close. She was tired, but she didn't stop. With each block she passed, Keanu's worry grew. What was he going to find at the end of this walk? Finally, after almost 40 minutes, she stopped. Keanu stayed hidden in the shadows, watching. She walked up to a small old trailer parked next to an empty lot. The outside was rusty. The metal looked worn down by time and weather. The windows were dark, except for a single weak light flickering from inside. She stood at the door for a moment. Then she took a deep breath, pushed it open, and stepped inside. Keanu stared at the trailer. This was her home. After working all night, After cleaning floors and stocking shelves, after walking nearly an hour through the cold streets, this small, broken trailer was where she lived. His heart ached. How long had she been living like this? Had anyone ever noticed? Had anyone ever cared? Keanu didn't know what to do. He couldn't just walk away. So he stood there for a long time, staring at the trailer, thinking. Then finally he turned and walked back into the night. But he knew one thing for sure. This night had changed something inside him. And he wasn't going to forget. Keanu moved very carefully, making sure not to make a single sound. He stopped just a few steps away from the small window of the trailer, his breath held as he peered inside. What he saw made his stomach drop. Inside the tiny trailer, two little children sat on a thin mattress on the floor. The space was very small, almost empty, except for a few old blankets and a small table pressed against the wall. The air inside looked cold. The walls were bare. There were no decorations, no toys, nothing that made the space feel like a home. Keanu's eyes followed the movement of an old woman. She reached into a plastic bag and pulled out a single piece of bread and a small container of thin soup. The children immediately sat up, their eyes wide and full of hunger. The old woman gave them a soft smile, a smile that looked warm, but Keanu could see something else behind it, tiredness. She looked exhausted, yet she hid it well. She carefully divided the little food into even smaller pieces, making sure the children each got some. There was no extra food. No full plates, no big portions, just enough so they wouldn't go to bed hungry that night. And then Keanu finally understood. This woman wasn't just coming home after work. She was fighting. She was fighting every single day to keep these children alive. Keanu felt a lump in his throat. He had always known that there was unfairness in the world, that some people had more than others. He had read about it, watched it in documentaries, and donated money to help. But this was different. This wasn't just a story on the news. This wasn't just numbers or statistics. This was real. And it was right in front of him. And in that moment he knew he couldn't just walk away. Keanu stood there in the darkness, still watching through the small window. The old woman sat beside the children, smiling at them, pretending that everything was fine. But Keanu could see beyond the smile. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes. He saw the slight tremble in her fingers as she held the spoon. He saw the way she watched the children eat, but she didn't eat anything herself. She wasn't eating. She was just watching her grandchildren eat. Keanu felt his chest tighten. It was a quiet moment with no words spoken, yet it said so much. This woman worked endless hours at a grocery store, cleaning, stocking shelves, always greeting customers with a polite smile. People saw her every day, but no one really saw her. No one knew that she went home every night without enough food. She gave everything she had. And no one noticed. No one helped. Keanu stepped back from the trailer, taking in a deep breath. The cold night air felt heavier now. He ran a hand over his face, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. That night, Keanu went home. But he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a deep sadness in his chest that he couldn't ignore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the small piece of bread being divided. He saw the woman holding back her tears, pretending she was satisfied just by watching her grandchildren eat. The scene haunted him. Keanu had always believed that kindness could change someone's life. But this wasn't just about buying her a meal. This was something much bigger. This was about a cruel reality that should never exist. And he knew he couldn't just ignore it. The next morning, Keanu woke up with a sense of urgency. The images from the night before wouldn't leave his mind. The elderly woman. The tiny empty trailer. The hungry children. He had spent years helping people, donating to charities, supporting different causes. But this wasn't about charity anymore. This was personal. So instead of following his usual routine, Keanu found himself back at the grocery store that afternoon. As he stepped inside, he glanced around. The woman, Clara Benet as he had heard the cashier call her, wasn't working yet. But Keanu wasn't there to see her. He needed answers. Keanu walked up to the front counter where the store manager was checking inventory. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. "I was wondering if I could ask you something about one of your employees." The manager looked up, blinking in surprise. He recognized Keanu right away but kept his professional attitude. "Of course, Mr. Reeves. What can I do for you?" "I want to ask about Clara Benet," Keanu continued. "She's been working here for a long time, right?" The manager hesitated for a second before nodding. "Yes, more than 10 years. She's one of our best employees, always on time, never complains, takes extra shifts whenever she can." Keanu studied the man's expression. "And how much does she make?" The manager's polite look faltered slightly. He cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. She earns minimum wage. Standard for part-time employees. Keanu's jaw tightened. And benefits? Health care. The manager sighed. She doesn't qualify for full benefits. She only works part-time. A bitter taste filled Keanu's mouth. She worked every night as many hours as she could, but they still didn't give her enough hours to receive benefits? Keanu left the store feeling a weight in his chest. As he stepped outside, the sun was shining bright overhead. But all he could see was the small, dimly lit trailer from the night before. This woman had spent her whole life working. She was supposed to be resting now, not struggling like this. She wasn't supposed to be skipping meals just so two little children wouldn't go to bed hungry. And yet, no one was helping her. Keanu clenched his fists. He had seen a lot in his life. He had seen struggle. He had seen loss. He had seen pain. But this wasn't just sad. This was unacceptable. And Keanu already knew. He had to do something. He didn't know what yet. But he wouldn't walk away. Not this time. Keanu walked away from the store, his mind full of thoughts. He had made a decision, but before doing anything he needed to talk to Clara Benet in person. That night, Keanu went back to the market. But this time he didn't go inside. Instead, he stood near a street lamp across the road, watching the store quietly. The street was empty except for a few people walking by, lost in their own world. The night was calm, the air cool, and the city lights flickered in the distance. Keanu didn't want to bother Clara Benet or make her feel uncomfortable. He just wanted to understand her life a little better. He had seen her so many times, always working hard, always tired. But he didn't know much about her. Why did she work so late? Where did she go after? Did she have anyone to help her? A little after midnight, the side door of the market opened. Clara Benet stepped outside. She was wearing the same old green blouse. It looked loose on her small, tired shoulders. The sleeves were slightly too big, and the fabric looked faded from too many washes. In her hands, she held a small plastic bag, hugging it close to her chest as she started walking down the quiet street. Keanu watched her carefully. He had followed her once before, but not to be rude. He just wanted to know where she went every night. But this time he didn't follow. Instead, he walked a few steps ahead and stopped near a vending machine on the sidewalk. He made sure he looked relaxed, as if he had just happened to be there. He leaned slightly against the vending machine, his hands in his pockets, his posture calm and friendly. As Clara Benet passed by, he spoke softly. "Good evening, Clara Benet." She stopped suddenly, surprised. Her tired eyes blinked as she looked at him, trying to remember who he was. "Oh, good evening, Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice polite but a little unsure. Keanu gave a small smile, his voice gentle. "Please, just Keanu," he said kindly. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to say hello. I see you here every night, so I thought it was time to introduce myself properly." Clara Benet hesitated. She seemed unsure of what to say. Then she nodded slowly. "That's very kind of you," she said, adjusting the bag in her hands. "I see you too, but I never wanted to disturb you." Keanu shook his head lightly. "You wouldn't have," he said. "But I understand. I like my quiet time too." She gave a small smile, but Keanu could see how tired she was. Her smile was warm but sad, as if she wasn't used to people talking to her. Keanu glanced at the small bag she was holding. He hesitated for a second before speaking again. He didn't want to ask too many questions or make her uncomfortable. So he kept his voice soft. "You work so late. That must be really tiring." Clara Benet let out a small sigh, as if she had been holding in her exhaustion all day. "It is," she admitted quietly. "But you do what you have to do, don't you?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess we all do." For a moment, everything was quiet. The city buzzed faintly in the background, but right then, it felt like only the two of them existed under the dim streetlight. Clara Benet adjusted her bag again, looking like she was ready to leave. Keanu didn't want to stop her, but something inside him told him he couldn't just walk away. He chose his next words carefully. "I know I don't know much about you," he said gently, "but if you ever need anything, sometimes it helps to have someone looking out for you." Clara Benet stiffened for a second. Keanu worried he had said too much. But then she let out a soft chuckle, as if the idea of someone caring was surprising to her. "That's kind of you, Keanu." Her voice was warm, but she sounded unsure, as if she wasn't used to kindness without a reason. She looked up at him one last time before giving a small nod. "It was nice talking to you, but I should get home." Keanu didn't stop her. He just nodded. "Have a good night, Clara Benet." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the dark streets. Keanu stayed there for a moment, watching her go. His chest felt heavy with thoughts. He hadn't asked too many questions, but now she knew. She knew that someone had noticed her. And somehow, Keanu felt this wouldn't be the last time they spoke. That night, Keanu lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He kept thinking about Clara Benet, her tired smile, the way she held her small plastic bag, how exhausted she sounded when she said she just did what she had to do. She had been polite, but Keanu could tell, she didn't expect anyone to help her. She had been alone for so long that she had stopped hoping for a better life. Keanu had met many people, actors, directors, famous people, rich people. But very few had made him feel the way Clara Benet did. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't looking for pity. She was just trying to survive. That's why Keanu's decision was easy. He wasn't going to walk away. The next morning, Keanu took action. But he didn't just want to give her money. He had seen too many times how money disappeared quickly, how it didn't solve the real problem. Clara Benet didn't need just money. She needed stability. She needed a home. So Keanu started making arrangements. He called people he trusted, real estate agents, charity workers, community helpers. He didn't want something big or fancy. He wanted something real, a place that felt like home. After hours of searching, he found it. A small house, modest but fully furnished. A safe neighborhood, close to schools where her children could grow up without worry. A place where Clara Benet wouldn't have to walk miles after work. A place where she could finally breathe. Keanu quietly took care of everything. He made sure the house was paid off, that the bills were covered, and even arranged a small trust fund so she would never have to worry about food. No cameras. No reporters. No headlines. Just a man who saw someone struggling and refused to do nothing. That night, Keanu went back to the market. Clara Benet was finishing her shift when he arrived. She stepped outside into the cold, holding her small plastic bag as always. She saw him and smiled, tired but warm. Keanu. What a surprise. He smiled back. Hey Clara Benet. Got a minute? She hesitated, then nodded. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I don't want to overwhelm you, he said softly. But I know life has been hard. And I want to help. Her hands shook as she opened it. She unfolded the paper inside. She read it once. Then again. And again. Tears filled her eyes. She covered her mouth, her whole body trembling. This is for me, she whispered. Keanu nodded. Now you have a home, Clara Benet. A real home. And for the first time, she believed it. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories filled with adventure, mystery, and excitement. Your support means the world, and it helps keep these stories coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.